Well, for more on a very busy day in the Trump administration, let's bring in our global economics analyst, Saruhan Hatipoglu. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening, Rachelle.
Certainly a busy day. Let's try and break down some of it. Let's start with this latest situation over President Trump sharing intel with Russia. What does all this mean for their economic ties?
Well, actually, in terms of economic ties, it's not going to affect the relations that much because there's not much to begin with, really. In 2012, when Russia entered World Trade Organization, things were looking very good because President Obama signed an agreement that the Congress endorsed that normalized trade relations with Russia. But then 2 years later, we know what happened with Ukraine and Crimea. So it's not going to affect economic relations as much. But in terms of politics, in terms of geopolitics, things are changing, and things are changing very rapidly because it is not really the concern of Russia-U.S. at this point, but it is the concern of U.S. allies. Because if U.S. President Trump is seen as leaking this information to a lot of the allies, who a lot of the allies consider as an enemy or not a friend, actually, then they will be less willing to share this information with the United States. And that is not good news in terms of intelligence when the war in Syria is going on.
So given then that this could perhaps distance the U.S. from some of its allies, depending on how reliable this information is about the leaks, what does that mean then in terms of the risks that the U.S. exposes itself to in having closer ties with Russia?
Well, it is very interesting because we've seen this very early in Trump administration, within a month or two. Some of the allies came straight out and criticized President Trump. Let's remember, what they're seeing, the allies that is a president that's giving statements and cabinet members giving another statement that contradicts that. We've seen that in NATO is an obsolete organization by President Trump. A week later, 2 weeks later, Mr. Tillerson visited Europe, consolidating support for NATO from the U.S. We've seen in South Korea with the TOD, the U.S. said, President Trump said, you are going to pay for it. A couple of days later, a high-ranking U.S. official says, no, we are going to pay for it. So this is going to increase risks because the allies are having a little problem in terms of who to believe. And that is not a good thing if you're the United States and countries are looking up to you.
And it certainly puts a lot of strain and a lot of focus. And this, as Turkey's president is visiting right now, President Erdogan, how does Turkey actually factor into the relationship that the U.S. has with Russia?
Well, because the relations with Turkey and Russia are warming now, it's been going on for about 6 months or so, maybe a little longer, the U.S. has a lot of interest in getting Turkey to its side because the situation in Syria is getting complicated by the minute. But the problem there is the U.S. support for the Kurdish protection units, which the Turkish government considers a terrorist organization. And the decision last week to arm this unit really angered Turks. Opposition to President Erdogan as well was up in arms about this, no pun intended. And there was an attack a month ago on Kurdish People's Protection Units in Syria by the Turks, the very group that the U.S. is arming right now. So this is not a good situation. I don't know how they're going to resolve this, but Turkey is adamant that this organization, this group has to be recognized as a terror organization, just like the PKK, which the U.S. recognized as a terrorist organization.
So then is it possible then for the U.S. to separate its geopolitical concerns then when it comes to really trying to further a trade relationship with Turkey?
Well, yes, they can do that. They have been doing that, actually. If you look at the trade numbers, trade volume, it has been increasing. Foreign direct investment, last year's numbers show that it's about 8% of total FDI in Turkey is from the U.S. That may look kind of low, but it's the second country in the list that is providing this type of investment. And it all comes down to, obviously, the security situation in Turkey. If U.S. companies view Turkey as an unstable country, which there's a possibility of that happening, then they're going to withhold foreign direct investment, they're going to withhold equity investment as well. But there are some really good sectors there that American businesses are looking at in Turkey.
And let's explore that. What are the industries and the sectors that do really draw investors to Turkey?
Well, nowadays, it's the automotive industry. It's doing really well. Turkey is a leading light commercial vehicle producer in Europe. So that's certainly one area. Plastics industry. Turkey is the 5th largest producer of that. There's a lot of foreign companies already in there. That's a pretty attractive sector as well. Also, aviation. Aviation has been growing about 10% in the past 5 years. There's a lot of possibilities. And then the last one I want to mention, which not many people are associating with Turkey, is the renewable energy. There's a wind project, for example, that is $1.2 billion. That's going to cover the 7 regions in Turkey. So this is something also very attractive for American companies, provided, again, that political risk is contained.
And just quickly, your outlook for Turkey's economy, given where it is now?
Not very positive. I'm going to give you a couple of things here. Inflation numbers. About 12% in April. This is the third consecutive monthly double-digit inflation, fifth consecutive monthly accelerating pace of inflation. And it is not only consumer prices. Producer prices were up 18% in the same month. That's a big concern. Lira is having difficulty again, depreciation of the lira. That is going to have an impact on non-financial company debt in Turkey. External debt hit 400 billion US dollars, 60 of which is in foreign currency. So if anything happens to the lira, this is going to have a significant impact on the Turkish economy. But there are also good news. Tourism is coming up. Right. The real GDP data was good for the fourth quarter. So we're going to watch that. We could be surprised. Retail sales are increasing. But again, it comes to how foreign investors view Turkey. If they view Turkey as a risky country, it's going to go back to the same problems.
Well, it certainly remains to be seen. Thank you so much for your insights, Saruhan Hatipoglu, our global economics analyst.